Good morning. Good to see you all on this oppressively hot and humid August Sunday morning. If you have your Bibles, please turn to John chapter 20. We'll be there in just a few minutes. You may follow along. You can follow along either on the brown Bibles in the slot in the pew in front of you or on your smartphone. When I was in high school, my buddies and I would spend our Friday and Saturday nights cruising the drag of our dusty little West Texas town. The drag was a stretch of Broadway in between the Sonic Drive-In and Allsup's convenience store. And we loved Sonic because they had cheap cherry lime slushes, and we loved Allsup's because they had indestructible, incorruptible fried burritos. They would fry these things up and then put them on a rack under a heating lamp, and they would sit there for days until someone bought one, and they were still good. And Friday and Saturday nights, we would drive back and forth up and down that drag, turn around, drive through Sonic, turn around in the parking lot of Allsup's. We'd do that over and over again. We had nothing else to do, listening to music, telling jokes, hoping that maybe some cute out-of-town girls would miraculously appear in a little red convertible. They never did. Instead, it was the same old faces in the same old cars driving that same old loop. And included in that group were a couple of 20-somethings who had graduated years before us, but they still came out on the drag on Friday and Saturday nights. They had cheesy mullets, unfortunate mustaches. They still wore their high school leather jacket, and they would pile into the Trans Am, and they would drive back and forth, cruising with the high school kids. And they thought they were so cool. And we found them to be sad and pathetic. We'd promise each other, we'll never be like that. We'll know who we are. We'll know how old we are. We'll never be like that. Because even then, we could tell they were a bunch of has-beens who were hanging on, which is just another way of saying they refused to let go. I've been thinking about transitions a lot lately. There's been a lot of transitions, will be a lot of transitions in my home. Life is a series of transitions. First days, last days, births, graduations, weddings, funerals, transition after transition after transition. And every transition is different, and yet they all have at least one thing in common. And that's every transition at some point requires us to let go. Every transition requires a letting go of the past as we move into the future. Otherwise, like the has-beens in my hometown, we get stuck in a moment, in a season, in a decade, in a hairstyle we can't get out of. And the struggle to transition, to keep moving forward, is captured beautifully, or perhaps I could say brutifully, a combination of brutal and beautiful. It's captured brutifully in a story out of John chapter 20. It's Mary Magdalene, and she encounters the risen Christ. And what is understandably a happy moment for her is also a devastating realization. Let's read the story. John 20, beginning in verse 11, it says, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. And they asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They have taken away my Lord,' she said, 'and I don't know where they have put him.' At this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus. He asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?' Thinking he was the gardener, she said, 'Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him.' And Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. And Jesus said, do not hold on to me. Some translations will say, do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. And Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her. It's this sentence, though, that we're going to focus on this morning, where after Mary realizes it's Jesus, and she grabs a hold of him, she's hugging him, she's clinging to him, he says, do not hold me. Do not cling to me. I've not yet ascended to the Father. She's been crying. Everyone in the story wants to know, why are you crying? Now she gets Jesus back and she grabs him, and Jesus says, no, do not. Don't hold on to me. Don't be clingy. You got to let go, because I've not yet ascended. It's a puzzling statement. Scholars have debated what exactly Jesus is saying for centuries. One way of reading this is that Mary, in her grief that turns to joy, Mary believes that she's gotten Jesus back. The Jesus she knew. The Jesus she had come to love. Jesus of Nazareth. But the Jesus standing before Mary is more than that. He's the risen Lord. He's been transformed. There's no going back. His resurrection after his crucifixion has changed everything, including him, and now it will change everything for her. Oh, she would love to hang on to the Jesus she knew, the Jesus she was accustomed to, the Jesus she was comfortable with. She thinks she's gotten the past back. She thought she had lost it, but now it's back. But Jesus says, no, you can't hang on to the me you once knew. I have been transformed and I am ascending, and you've got to let go. Because in letting go of Jesus as he's ascending, Mary is now open to receiving something new, made possible by Jesus' death, resurrection, and his ascension. Do not cling, he says, for I am ascending. And this story personalizes the struggle that all of Jesus' first disciples had as they walked through this transition with the risen Christ. It couldn't have been easy for any of them. It had to be a time of confusion. A time of grief turned to joy, turned to what? Huh? Because when he's crucified, they really believe they've lost him. He's a failed Messiah. He's dead. His body's in the tomb. It's over. They've lost him forever. They must get accustomed to never seeing Jesus, the one they loved, the one they followed again. But then he's raised from the dead. They get him back, but it's not the same old Jesus. It's the risen Lord. And it's changed him. It's changed them. It changes everything. And so in the Gospels and in the first part of Acts, we see Jesus and the disciples going through a 40-day period of adjustment. That 40 days in between Jesus' resurrection and the day of Pentecost, where Jesus is explaining to them and helping them understand the implications of what has happened to him and what is going to happen to them. He's going to ascend, and he's preparing them for that. And then Jesus ascends, which means, once again, they lose Jesus. The Jesus they can touch, the Jesus they can cling to, the Jesus they knew. He leaves. It's a departure, and it's hard, but it's also necessary. Luke Timothy Johnson describes it this way. He says, the withdrawal, the ascension of Jesus, is not so much an absence as it is a presence in a new and more powerful mode. When Jesus is not among them as another specific body, he is accessible to all as the life-giving Spirit. They lost him, they got him back, but then they lose him again when he ascends. And now Jesus, because of his ascension, makes it possible for the Holy Spirit to be poured out on not just the disciples, but the whole world. This is hard, and yet it opens up a blessing for the whole world. And it's these events that form the heart of the gospel story. that establish for us a somewhat predictable pattern which we all experience throughout all the different transitions of our lives. This is gospel wisdom. So we have a sequence of events marked out by the Jesus story. We all experience death. Literally, yes, but also symbolically, we lose parts of our life that we love. But out of death comes new life. There's resurrection, but resurrection is confusing. And there's a time of adjustment where we must still grieve what we lost, but also become accustomed to the new reality. And then at some point there is ascension where we let go of the old so that Pentecost can come. The Spirit can be poured out and we receive what is new. And I love this sequence of events because it reminds me that the gospel story, it's not just a story about how we're saved. It's also a wisdom story that shows us how to live. Because we will experience this sequence in life over and over and over again. And one of the most essential life skills we can develop is to learn how to navigate these 5 events in their proper sequence so that we can let go of the old and receive the new thing God has for us. This skill is essential for our ongoing development and growth as human beings. Some of the most mature, well-adjusted, helpful, wise, effective people in the world keep in step with this sequence. They know where they are as they navigate transitions. Some of the least mature, the most ill-adjusted, the least helpful, the least effective, the most foolish people in the world are those who are out of step with this sequence. They get stuck in a season of life that's passed them by and it's never coming back, but they're stuck in it and they can't keep moving forward. Because over the course of a lifetime, we all experience many deaths, and it's death that initiates this sequence. Over the course of a lifetime, we all experience many deaths. We experience the death of our youth. Now, the only people in this room who need me to explain what the death of youth is like are the young. Everyone else, you know. You see it in the mirror. You feel it in your bones when you get out of bed. You have to let go of your youth, your innocence, your naivete, so that you can receive the wisdom that comes with age. And it's what is supposed to make older people more helpful than younger people. It's why the younger people go to the older people, because the older people have been able to let go of that in the past and receive the new wisdom. And it is quite sad to see people who can't or won't act or dress their age. They're not comfortable in their own skin. They're not comfortable in their own station in life. They're reaching back instead of moving forward. And it's hard. Some years ago, I crossed a line where there are clothes I can no longer wear. I can still wear them. They fit. I just should not wear them. I try them on, step out of the closet around the corner, and Heather gives me a sympathetic look and says, "Not anymore, honey. Not anymore," which is way kinder than what my boys say. There's also something quite sad about parents who cannot embrace their children's death of their youth. As our kids grow up, it's easy to get caught up in, as a parent, still refusing to let our 18 or 21 or 25-year-old grow up. We see it all the time. We coddle, we protect, we hover. And if we refuse to embrace it, they're growing older, they're becoming more independent. We also miss out on a completely new way of having a relationship with our children. It's not parent to child, it becomes adult to adult, man to man. Yes, this is a bit personal for me today. I'm doing some therapy on myself today. One of the secrets of life is having the ability to let go of what was so that we can receive this new thing that God has for us. Because we experience many deaths over the course of a lifetime. We experience the death of our dreams. Wake up one morning and you realize the life you thought you would live when you're growing up, the life you thought you were going to live 20 years ago, it's never coming. That dream is over. Maybe it's because of a choice you made. Maybe it's because of something someone else did. There was a betrayal. There was an abandonment. Maybe it's something that happened inside of you. Maybe it's something that happened all around you. But that dream is dead. It's over. It's never coming back. And you can hold on to it. And you can get stuck in that moment. And you can be mired in depression and regret. Or you can let go of it and receive something new. It is impossible to receive a new dream from God when you're holding on to an old one in the past, or when you're clinging to what was or what might have been. This skill is essential for growth. It's deep gospel wisdom because we experience many deaths over the course of a lifetime. We experience the death of our honeymoons. Honeymoon is a time between I do and you'd better. Honeymoon is a period where you're still living under the illusion that you have chosen the perfect mate, or that you have accepted this perfect, ideal job. This can function symbolically, or that you've joined the perfect church that'll never hurt you, never let you down, never disappoint you. And honeymoons are wonderful and glorious, and they're supposed to be, and it's this fantastic illusion that this is ideal, but they never last. And we experience the death of our honeymoons, and we realize the person we've married is not perfect and is incapable of meeting all of our needs and living up to our expectations. And we realize that in a real way, the rest of our lives, the rest of our marriage will be one disappointment after another. Because it's two broken people, two hurting people, two messed up people trying to be one. We experience the death of our honeymoon, and we realize this job isn't always going to be fulfilling. I'm not always going to love going to work. I'm not always going to enjoy the people I work with or work for. We realize that the church is going to let us down. It's full of broken people. And it's at that moment when we realize the honeymoon is over that we move past the illusion, stop clinging to a fantasy that could never exist, and we're ready to embrace a reality that is not easy, but it is rewarding and fruitful when two people or two groups of people or a group of people begin to do the hard work of loving and serving and forgiving one another. But that is a kind of life that does not exist in fantasy world. That is a reality. And we have to embrace it. And the only way we will ever embrace it is to realize the honeymoon's over. It's dead. We experience many deaths over the course of a lifetime. We experience the death of a certain idea or experience of God or church. So what often happens is we have a transforming experience of the Lord, life-changing. It often happens when we're young. And the temptation is we idealize and memorialize that experience of God so that that is who God is always and what God always does. And we turn it into a monument, much the same way that Peter wanted to at Jesus' transfiguration. Peter gets this glimpse of Jesus in all his glory. And Peter's response is, I want to stay on this mountain. I want to build 3 shelters, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and one for Christ. But let's never leave. This is good. Let's stay here. Meanwhile, Jesus intends to walk down the mountain and head to Jerusalem where he will be crucified. But the temptation is to have a powerful experience and hold it up as the ideal and memorialize it, which is just one move over from idolizing it. And it's these powerful experiences of God in our past that if we cling to them, they can keep us from the new experience of God in our future. One of my favorite spiritual writers, this is my favorite quote from him. Richard Rohr says, "The last experience of God is frequently the greatest obstacle to the next experience of God." The last experience of God is the greatest obstacle to the next experience of God because we make an absolute or an idol out of it. And all great spirituality is about letting go. Letting go so we can receive the new. We experience the death of a certain idea of God. We can also experience the death of a certain kind or idea of church. We have this ideal vision of the church we grew up in 20 years ago, 40 years ago. We idealize it, we idolize it, and nostalgia is a powerful narcotic. And no matter what experience we have moving forward, we're always a bit cynical. We're always a bit held back because we can say, well, it was okay, but it wasn't as great as, remember when we, The truth is, for many of us, the kind of church we grew up in is dead. And it's never coming back. You can pine for it, you can long for it, you can talk about it, you can wish for it, you can complain when this doesn't live up to it, and it's still never coming back. It died, not because it was bad. Good things die all the time. Good things die so that new things can be born. New good things can be born. It's when we hold on to, when we cling to that old thing that is dying or has died, that's when we're unable to open our hands and receive the new thing God wants to bring us. We experience many deaths over the course of a lifetime. And the question is this morning, what do we do with the deaths we experience? There are different ways of responding to these deaths. The Egyptians mummified their dead. Mummification is an attempt to preserve the dead as they were. The gospel does not create mummies. The Spirit of God that raised Jesus from the dead is not interested in mummification, the preservation of what was. The Spirit of God that raises the dead is interested in transformation, bringing something new out of what has died. If we can let go of the old and keep moving forward with God, we will experience this sequence of events over and over and over. We will name our deaths. We will claim our births. We will adjust to the new reality. We will let go of the old, and we will receive the new. I wonder this morning if you can locate yourself in this sequence. Where are you in this sequence? Is there something going on in your life that's been causing you frustration and stress, worry? Something's just not right. You feel out of sync with the world. Maybe it's because you're somewhere in this sequence with some area of your life. Is there a death you need to name? A new birth to claim? Are you in a season where you're grieving the loss of the old, but you're also preparing for it, anticipating and adjusting for the new life that's coming? Is it time to let go? To let go so that your hands are open. So you're ready to receive the new life, the new spirit, the new thing that God is ready to bring you. Because God is always moving us forward, always pulling us into his future. But to go with God, we have to let go of the past. This is deep gospel wisdom. With every death, there is the potential, the promise of new life. And may God give us the strength and the courage and the wisdom to know when and how to let go so we can receive. Let's stand and sing.